Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Board of Directors, Lincolnshire Partnership NHS Foundation Trust. I'm Kevin Lockyer and I'm the Trust Chair. Right, shall we then move on to the formal part of our business this morning? Apologies for absence. If we have any, they'll be noted in the minutes. Ditto declarations of interest, if there are any that people have got that aren't already on register, please shout now. If not, we will move on to the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of April. Do colleagues have any matters they wish to bring to our attention from those minutes? If there are none, are colleagues happy for me to sign them as an accurate record of that meeting? Yep, thank you very much. There are lots of indications of yes in the chat, so thank you. Move on then to the schedule of actions. There is one outstanding action. The progress on it is pretty well documented, but happy to take any questions or comments on that. I don't see any, so we'll move on then to item 1.5, which are remarks from the chair. I don't have anything terribly pressing that isn't covered elsewhere in the agenda, but I will say this, and that is to record the board's appreciation for all the work that's going on, both as part of the Living Within Our Means programme and more generally, to tackle the challenges that the current financial position present the trust. I'm really very conscious of the fact that it is these are issues that are taking up a significant even perhaps the majority of the time of our exec colleagues. So I think it's right to acknowledge that work's going on, that it's as important as it is, and there's as much effort going into it as there is. So my appreciation for that. Thank you very much. With that, then I will move on to the Chief Executive's report. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Morning, everybody. I'm Sarah Connery, Chief Executive here at the Trust. So this is my usual report, giving an update on key local, regional, national issues. First of all, just to say we're still awaiting the new 10-year plan for health. From what I've had from updates, it still is based around the three tenets that we've talked about previously many times at board, which is a shift from hospital to community care, from analogue to digital, and sickness to prevention, which, as we've spoken about previously, is completely in line with our trust strategy and our accompanying target operating model that we are building together. So the spending review release is due next week. And obviously anything that's within the 10-year plan needs to be closely aligned in terms of the spending review that goes along with it. I haven't got any other details other than to say it will be a challenging spending review, as we can see through the media. Hence why we need to make sure that we're continuing to push forward with our Living Within Our Means programme. And just to build on Kevin's point, I want to say a massive thank you, not just to the executive team, but all of the organisation really, that is really pushing hard to think creatively about how we can best use our resources. This is obviously quite unsettling, not just for people in LPFT, but for our ICB colleagues, all of our trust across the NHS colleagues, as well as NHS England as well, while all of the infrastructure is going through quite significant changes. I have mentioned in my report about an NHS leadership event, a national event on the 29th of April, where we did have a bit of an update in terms of the emerging models. Nothing is set in stone at the minute, hence why there's nothing that's clarified within my report today. I was at a similar Midlands NHSE event on Tuesday, where again we talked about some of the potential options that are there, but still no clarity as of yet. But we do have some clarity around the deadlines, which is the ICB 50% reductions need to be in place by Q3, and the NHSE abolishment and merging in with Department of Health and Social Care will be moving forward over the next 12 months. The key point that comes out of everything is delivery, 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 and making sure that we are achieving our agreed targets and financial plan for the year, which we'll come on to in our integrated performance report. I did just want to flag to the board around the NHS performance assessment framework. We did have a chance to engage in a previous consultation. As a result of early feedback, that was kind of then followed up by a subsequent consultation, which closed at the end of May. Apologies, I was supposed to have included the link to that consultation document just so that people were clear what was involved in the proposed new assessment framework, which I will make sure that is circulated around to the board. So we're still waiting feedback on what the consultation will direct us to land on in terms of the performance assessment framework, given it is for the financial year 2025-2026. Just to flag as part of that, there is quite a significant reduction in the number of metrics which are being proposed through that framework. So a reduction down to 20. A key one for us, if you are forecasting a financial deficit, delivering a financial deficit, then you are automatically put into segment 3. Just to flag, to remind colleagues, we are currently a segment 1 organisation. And there's also a lot of focus as well around the mental health community survey, as well as staff survey as well. So it's well worth us considering what that might mean for us moving forward. Back to the open action on the schedule of actions, that again means that we will need to refresh our integrated performance report to make sure that it reflects those targeted priorities. Something that as well is being reflected through those leadership events that I've mentioned is, although there could be 20 metrics through that consultation process, it doesn't mean that they're the only things that we need to focus on. I was really keen to make sure that I reiterated through our Mental Health, Dementia, Learning Disability and Autism Alliance in the system that we're focusing on outcomes for our population. And I think our patient story just there really exemplifies, if we are getting the right therapeutic relationships and supporting people through reasonable adjustments to live their best life in the community, then we will deliver those right outcomes. So that was really pleasing to hear that our system colleagues are still wanting to push, working together in partnership as an alliance, those outcomes. In terms of the Living Within Our Means programme, in terms of the capacity, we have got a paper later on in the board around proportionate governance, and we've been having conversations as an executive team around what does that mean for our priorities, our strategic delivery plans. That is obviously a conversation that we want to make sure that we're having as a board. So we'll be bringing those conversations through committees and up to the board as well, in terms of what are we going to focus on, what are we going to stop, pause or slow down to make sure that we're able to live within our means, not just from a financial point of view, but also within our limited capacity. It will be remiss of me not to mention it is Pride Month this month. Apologies, I wrote the report before I went on leave for half term. Didn't think far enough ahead. So a big happy Pride Month to everybody. I am the LGBTQ+ staff network executive sponsor, and we're doing some pieces through the Weekly Word on what Pride Month means to us. We're having a key focus through our network around the protection of our rights for the LGBTQ+ community. So quite timely that we've got Pride Month this month. I do want to say a big shout out, a big thanks to the Wolds team and our Heartzone team, our psychiatric intensive care unit, who've recently had Mental Health Act visits as well. Really positive. Really good feedback around patient-centred, compassionate, high-quality care that we're delivering on those units. So a massive thank you from me for all the staff and patients that were involved in those visits there. I think I'll stop there, Kevin. There's a lot going on. I hope the report does that justice, but as usual, I'm happy to answer any comments or questions on anything that's included or not included for that matter.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for a typically comprehensive update. I just want to add one thing before I hand over to colleagues, and that is just to reiterate the point that as a board we will continue to be focused on population health outcomes, patient experience, and what's important to us locally, whatever the suite of NHS mandated performance metrics might be. As a board, we will never just focus on them, and however we refine our integrated performance report and the reporting that goes into performance committee, it will always reflect those local priorities first and foremost. Just to bring in then colleagues, Tim.
Thank you, Kevin. Tim Harry, non-exec director, and thanks, Sarah, as usual, for your report. It was really just a comment to say, really great to see the new staff wellbeing offer in place, because I think we all know that's really important. And I guess what will be interesting is to see what happens in the staff survey results and other metrics like staff absence, because it will take, I guess, a little bit of time to bed in and for people to fully utilise it. But I think that's a very positive step forward. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you, Tim. We had a conversation yesterday at the exec team around the employee assistance programme. And I know Amy and the team are doing some sort of helpful little vlogs and videos just to make sure staff are aware of what's available, because it is quite a comprehensive offer. So it's making sure that we maximise those benefits for our staff. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because from my experience, they are very comprehensive, and people don't quite often sort of pick up on the full scope of things they can utilise. So great, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Di.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Sarah. I wonder if you could just say a little bit more. On page 2 of the report, you make reference to the Mental Health, Dementia, Learning Disability and Autism Alliance and the NHSE assessment, which I assumed included services in addition to our Mental Health Urgent Assessment Centre and our Psychiatric Clinical Decisions Unit. So I just wonder if you could just say a little bit more about what services were in scope, given that this was kind of like the urgent end of care, and what prompted it from the Alliance perspective, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was very comprehensive. So looked at the whole system rather than just LPFT services. So yeah, so AMP services, ambulance, the police. So it felt right that it had a home in the Alliance, given a sort of broad range of partners that we had there. And it's now going to go to the Urgent and Emergency Care Board, where all those partners are also represented as well, because it does impact as our EPRR, our emergency response through the ICB, who obviously hold a big, level of responsibility around that as well. So a real comprehensive piece of work. In terms of the prompt, it was seen as something that we all really could value. It was an offer from NHS England, and that extra capacity that we don't have to pay for, if I'm being completely honest, in terms of that extra capacity to do that review. We were like, absolutely, let's use that and see if there's any learning. And they've done it across a number of systems so that they're able to bring that learning in as well. It is quite a comprehensive action plan that Lee Wing is sort of spearheading as well, but she will need a lot of support from system partners to make sure that we're able to properly maximise on those potential benefits for people needing sort of crisis care for their mental health within Lincolnshire.
Okay. That's really helpful, Sarah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Di. Sarah Whiteman.
Thank you. Sarah Whiteman, Non-Executive Director. Sarah, I wonder if you could say a little bit about how you feel our trans community are feeling in light of recent legislative guidance.
Yeah, excellent question. They're feeling quite vulnerable, and I'm talking on behalf of staff as well as our patient group as well. So trying to make sure that we're being as supportive as possible through our LGBTQ plus staff network. We are pushing the NHSE national team around the guidance in terms of what this actually means in terms of delivering services, and myself and Kevin were hoping to be able to cover that in today's board, but we are still awaiting that guidance. So we're just going to have to bear with us while we wait for that national guidance to be with us. So thank you.
But thanks, Sarah. Just to add to that, I think it's my view that we shouldn't be acting unilaterally to do anything in the wake of the Supreme Court judgment, and we need to wait until we get guidance from NHS England. As Sarah says, it is I'll use diplomatic language, disappointing that guidance has yet to surface, and as I understand it, there is at the moment no indication of when that guidance will arrive, but as soon as it does, I think we will bring it to board so that we're clear about exactly what we need to do and how we might do it. Sarah, I don't see any further comments or questions for you. So thanks very much for, as I say, a characteristically comprehensive report and a useful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So we'll move on then, if we may, to item 2.2, which is the Board Assurance Framework. Karen.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Scott. I'm the Trust Secretary at LPFT. This morning I'm presenting the board's quarterly review of the Board Assurance Framework, and just a couple of points to draw out of the report, which I'll take as read. There's a summary from each of the board committees regarding each of their reviews of their sections of the BAF. And also to point out that this has in its full form been to the Audit and Risk Committee for full review and is being recommended to the board for approval today. Importantly, I want to draw out the point that currently the BAF is undergoing a comprehensive review. That's in the period of time between the end of the last round of committee meetings and the next round. Looking at particularly some of the issues that have been flagged and discussed more frequently by the committees, particularly risk target scores, but also some issues that have been arising in regard to the risk descriptors, which are not necessarily being considered to be as helpful as possible in scoring and assessing those risks. So we have actually been drawing some of those out and drilling down and broadening them. So that review will cover a whole host of things, and I'm anticipating being able to present a draft format, revised format of the BAF to each of the respective board committees in their Q1 meetings. What will be discussed later in the proportionate governance arrangements paper, subject to the board's approval of those proposals today, where there is potentially no meeting in Q1 of a particular board committee, we will need to do that virtually. But suffice to say that we will ensure that full engagement has been sought by the executive leads for each section and the non-executive director committee members, as well as the Audit and Risk Committee chair prior to its review. Other than that, Kevin, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Found the format really helpful. It's really good as a work in progress. So thank you very much for that, Karen. I mentioned to you in advance of the meeting that I would encourage People Committee to look at one of the particular risks, risk 3 around workforce, where I think the nature of the risk has shifted from numbers of staff to having the right kind of skill mix, and it might bear the committee having a quick look at whether or not that risk still captures the reality of the risk and the likelihood of it crystallizing. But that's a point of detail. I think, generally this is a really good approach. So I'll take comments from others. Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Ian Orrell, the audit chair. Just very quickly, I just wanted to effectively reinforce what Karen has said earlier. I do pick this up in the audit paper later on in this agenda, but in particular, just wanted to make the point that the audit committee is pleased with the progress that's been made, and we'll look forward to the review that Karen referred to earlier. So we'll see that sort of towards the back end of summer. So that was all. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Ian. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, for a really good report. Something that I think we just need to consider in terms of, I'm trying to think about which BAF risk it relates to, and it's probably a number of them, but particularly safe and high quality care, that while we go through the Living Within Our Means programme and people are feeling unsettled, just making sure that we can continue to deliver, achieve our trust strategy while people's heads are quite understandably a bit turned, and again, not just LPFT but across the NHS. So I think that's something that we need to attend to in the risk register. Thank you.
Sarah, if I could just comment, Kevin, that it's a really valid point, Sarah, obviously, and we'll make sure that we weave that in and ensure it's encapsulated in any appropriate point within the BAF. And I think that could be cover more than one area and one particular and one risk individually.
Thank you.
So my suggestion on that, Karen, it's a suggestion to you and to Ian as Chair of Audit and Risk, is that Audit and Risk takes a look at whether or not the suite of risks that we've got currently reflected in the BAF, taken as a whole, properly reflect the range of risks that the Trust currently faces. That's a way of systematically looking at whether or not the very real risk that Sarah has just identified is properly reflected in one or more risks in the BAF. So if Ian's happy to take that as an action for audit and risk, just to make sure that we've got the right kind of, that the risk that the risks we've identified are comprehensive and they don't have any significant gaps.
Thanks, Kevin. And I should have added that as part of that review, what I really want to do is ensure even greater alignment with the Trust strategy in terms of those strategic objectives and risks. But you're absolutely right. There are things that won't necessarily be drawn out of the strategy because that was at a point in time. So we do need to make sure that this is a living document and reflects the current position. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. Let's move on then to item 3.1, which is the highlight and exception report from Quality Committee. Sarah.
Good morning again, Sarah Whiteman, Non-Executive Director. Yes, overall a very positive report from the Quality Committee when we last met on the 17th of April. I would ask the board to note the positive assurances around issues like our Valdo-Callicane response and our inclusivity. For example, the way the patient voice is being heard and the participation of the Integrated Care Board in our meetings, and the work of primary care to improve the interface, especially with respect to prescribing and communication. I'd like to alert the board to 3 areas of ongoing challenge, which I think are important, and obviously we will continue to work and monitor with the executive team. One is around physical health checks for patients with severe mental illness. We know that these patients are more vulnerable and more susceptible to long-term conditions and premature death. So it's really important that physical health checks happen. And there is an issue about how these are commissioned and take place. So that's something we need to be aware of, because clearly affects some of our patients. Secondly, we note the need for a much more dynamic and positive approach to multi-professional working across the trust. So less about, for example, consultants vacancy rates, the medical workforce, more about transformation, how we can work in new, different ways, and evidence-based models of care. So we're trying to develop that approach to how we do things differently, and not just focus on a traditional type approach. And thirdly, we're wanting to hear more about clinical effectiveness. So how do we know that the way we do things in LPFT is good for our patients? So what are the outcomes? So the Chief Medical Officer has been tasked to provide an update of the Trust's work, including how we can demonstrate these outcomes to the July committee. That summarises the highlight and exception report. The other ask is about agreeing to approve the annual safeguarding declaration, which is a very positive statement showing that we fulfil all our requirements, we're well staffed, and there are a board level executive director lead and a non-executive director champion, and that's me, and I would commend that to the board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Really welcome the work that Quality Committee is doing. I think your areas of focus that you've just described are absolutely spot on. So thank you very much for that. Comments or questions from colleagues? Karen.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Sorry. Also to just point out that the committee's annual report is appended, and the board does need to approve that prior to it being presented for information to the Council of Governors. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for reminding me of that. If there are no other questions or comments on Sarah's report, are colleagues happy to approve the annual report of the committee? Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for that, and thank you for the continued focus of the Quality Committee. It's greatly appreciated. Right, we will move on then to the next item 3.2, Sharon, which is the Trust report to Trust response to the Calicain case. Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Sharon Harvey, Chief Nursing Officer. So the purpose of this report is to present an update on the work we've done following the tragic events in Nottingham around Valdo Calicain. There's a requirement from NHS England for me to present this paper to our board, but also for the paper to have been presented to the ICB board, which happened a couple of weeks ago. And that's following the original paper that colleagues will remember was presented in November, December time. So I've shared the action plan as part of the paper, and I'm able to provide further detail around any specific actions, either outside of the meeting or potentially within if people need. And it has been, as I said, discussed at length in the ICB board. I'll pull out the key points for you, but you'll see through Sarah's highlights and exceptions report, this was also discussed at length in Quality Committee. So the paper's here for information. Board will recall that we've set up a task and finish group since November, and that this paper's hopefully providing updates. You'll see that we've looked at caseload audits, and that's identified what benefits an assertive outreach type or intensive support type approach would have if we were able to afford it. And I think we heard that from the patient story today as well, around the impact that type of approach in our community rehab team has had. You'll see and hopefully gain some assurance from the work we did on looking at patients that have had repeated Mental Health Act detentions, also a review around where did not attend was the last contact that people have had. There has been a development of a business case, so we have got that developed, but colleagues will recognise the challenge that we're under financially from a resource perspective. And I know that the challenge around this is being discussed a lot regionally and nationally. There has been just some discussion, and some of the feedback from the ICB board is around that identification and information sharing that you'll see on page 3. And we are looking at how we can alert if somebody does have that type of presentation where they're more difficult to engage. But again, there's quite a lot of resource, not just cost, but time and different ways of working around that. One of the things I just want to draw board's attention to is that the support that we've offered to staff, patients and family carers around the fear and the anxiety that they might be experiencing on the back of the tragic incidents in Nottingham, and how scary it must be if you do have unusual experiences, and to know that it is, although absolutely tragic, really rare that people do go on to hurt other people. So in terms of the timeline, just provide a quick update, which is on the bottom of page 4. The system learning event on the 1st of April did attend, and I know take place, and I know some board colleagues attended that. We have had conversations around whether we would have a future one in due course when we're further on with our learning, and you'll see the action plan there. Since the paper has been written, we've strengthened the governance around the task and finish group so that it now formally reports through our performance delivery and oversight group and through to performance committee, ensuring the board receive regular updates on progress and get early sight of any challenges to delivery. And there's been one meeting since this paper was written by the task and finish group, but nothing significantly to update. So finally, I just want to formally note thanks to Nick Harwood for his leadership in this area, who's our Director of Operations for Adult Community, because he's been really focused and dedicated. And just before I move on to any questions, the RAG rating isn't in relation to risk, it's in relation to progress against the action. So if the action's not progressed yet or isn't close to completion, it will be marked as red. It's not because at this point we're identifying risk to delivery, but we are developing a risk matrix alongside it. I hope that's high level enough for board, but I'm really happy to try and take the comments and questions that are coming through. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Yeah, there are several comments and questions. We'll start with Di.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Sharon. Di Bailey, Non-Exec Director, and importantly, I guess, for this item, Chair of Performance Committee that will be receiving this report in future. So just a couple of things from me, really. First of all, I just wanted to commend the methodology that's been employed here in terms of making sure that we've had a really good systematic look across people who use our services to check in that we are you know, what we're doing regarding the needs of this group. So first of all, thank you for that. I suppose I was a bit surprised that I didn't see anything in the report about this group of people in terms of the use of community treatment orders, even if it was just to say that for this particular group of people, community treatment orders don't offer us the opportunities for engagement and compliance that perhaps we thought they might, given that I think is an important message to feed up to more widely, really, in terms of what's happening with the mental health legislation review at the moment and where we are with that, because I think, and I recognise obviously there are some challenges around community treatment orders when we've got volatility in the housing sector. So I get the issue, but I just think it's something that it would be helpful to understand a bit more about in terms of this population. In terms of the RAG rating, thank you for clarifying. That's helped me as Chair of Performance Committee. I do think, you know, it's important that we have a look at those areas coming forward. I did note that I think those actions are against 16 individuals, and so there seems to be a lot of moving parts. And I suppose as Chair of Performance Committee, and perhaps when we get the report up through PDOG, it's just about thinking how we ensure that there's some safeguards in place, given that that things do sit with so many people and you know, and are so wide ranging. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Di. Is it okay, Kevin, if I just quickly come back on that?
Yes, of course it is. Please do.
In relation to community treatment orders, thank you, Di, that's really helpful. I'll ask the Task and Finish group to pick that up. And in relation to how many people have oversight of the action plan, it's something Nick and I talked about a lot, because what we didn't want to do was end up with lots of different action plans. So we felt it better to hold it all in one action plan. That's one of the reasons we've chosen for it to come through the performance route, because that's where all the different areas of portfolios come together. But I agree, and I think that oversight through the committee will be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Di. Tim.
Thanks, Kevin. So Tim Harry, Non-Exec Director. Thanks, Sharon. I mean, I think it's great to give us that level of assurance around the breadth and the scope of the review. It's obviously very thorough, which is fantastic. I'm a bit interested in the dedicated, intensive and assertive function, but perhaps I can catch up with you outside on that one. I guess my comment or question really is, quite rightly, there's a particular focus on sort of frontline operational issues in this review. And I just wondered, from your perspective, if there's a more that we as a board need to do in our role, other than obviously receiving and discussing this report, but is there anything else that we should be mindful of?
It's a good question, Tim. I think there's something about how we bear this client group in mind through when we hear learning and when we hear around near misses. And I think there's something on probably myself and Girish in ensuring we feed enough information in to enable that curiosity. I think one of the challenges around this client group is there's not as many people it's for fewer people who access our services that would need this level of intensity, and therefore it's almost harder to see them in the data and the figures. So there's something around how we lend ourselves to that. The other bit for me, and this might be more from my own professional experience, but it's how we don't just focus on the assertive outreach or the traditional assertive outreach, so people that have very enduring illnesses. For me, it's around how people that if we don't support them will end up with enduring illnesses. So around people experiencing psychosis that are difficult to engage but aren't so far through their journey they would meet assertive outreach. And I think there's something there when we look at our longer term strategy around how we consider that group. But I'll reflect on that question more as well, because it's a very good one. Thank you.
No, thank you, Sharon. So a bit more around, I think what you're saying is around sort of, it's almost a preventative piece rather than waiting for them, but we need to be able to cope with that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Amy. I didn't miss you this time, so you can't accuse me of picking on you.
No worries. So I'm Amy Beaton. I'm Chief People Officer here at the Trust. Just to echo Sharon, really, Di's comments about the level of work and actions taken by the team reflected in this paper is really extensive with, you know, real clear identification of additional work and challenges. So I think it's a really comprehensive paper. You partially answered actually the question that I had, which was around the appendix action plan. So that was really helpful to understand the RAG rating. I suppose the only bit that I would follow up in is there is timeframes in that action plan that have passed. And so I was kind of left questioning, you know, what does that mean? Have we extended the time frame? Have we identified alternative course of action? You know, I don't, you know, whether it's an additional column in it, but I feel that more assurance could be provided in terms of what's happening with those actions where the timeframes have already passed.
Thank you, Amy. Really fair challenge. What I'll do is I'll make sure that's captured through the next report that comes through Performance Delivery Oversight Group, so that the committee have assurance where things have either passed or are close to coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Girish.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sharon. So I'm Dr. Girish Kudgiri. I'm the Chief Medical Officer. Just wanted to echo some of the discussions, what happened in terms of how detailed the paper is. As Chief Medical Officer, I feel very assured that the way we have put things in place in terms of identifying and managing some of these patients in the community mental health team is robust. I also need to just add one more thing, that from the national perspective, there was a matrix which was developed by NHS England, which was distributed to all the organizations to self-rate, which LPFT was a part of it. And given my national role for the Midlands, I did see that LPFT is really strong in terms of how we have done the work so far in terms of identifying and managing these patients, and the feedback what we have received from NHSE with regard to our matrix submission has definitely been positive. So I think we are going in the right direction, and if we are successful with the business plan, that will add more to the recovery of these patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Girish. Chris Wright.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Sharon, for all the work that's going on here. I guess there's nothing more important for our communities than to give them assurance that we're managing this area effectively. My question is really around the identification and information sharing, which I guess gets to the real nub of the issue. And it's good to see that we're going to be flagging potential risks on the patient record. I'm concerned about the pace and how that process will be applied consistently, and the reporting of it and who it goes to and how we keep a track of that. I think that's a question.
Yeah, I think it's really fair, and I share the concern on it, in all honesty, in terms of how we not just have the process, but how we ensure our teams have got the capacity and the changed approach to follow the process, because it's only good having an alert on the system if the teams know it's there, know where to find it, can see it and utilise it. So there's a piece of work for us there, and also across the system, because it's great if we've got a way of alerting and being clear in LPFT, but we also need to ensure primary care colleagues have similar, if somebody's moving into our area from another area or moving from our area out of area, how do we ensure that? So there's work going on nationally and regionally looking at that, but also it's the point that the ICB raised as well around where they'd like some strengthening in the action plan. So the Task and Finish group have already started having conversations, and our digital and data leads engaged in those as well. And we're going to have to try and work through what that means from a resource perspective, but also the benefits of it. So I think it's a really fair challenge. I know that doesn't answer the question, Chris, but hopefully it lets you know that we are also cited on it and trying to look at timescales and what we can do and how. And we're not the only ones in the boat, I guess.
Sure. Thanks, Sharon. I mean, I guess when you look at any serious incidents across the country, across sectors, they tend to be based on communication issues.
Absolutely.
And the ability to ensure that people know what's happening. So this is the most fundamental thing I think we can get right. And I stress the need for pace. And I think also there's an issue around the cultural element associated with this, and how we ensure that people are properly trained and
Absolutely.
seized of the importance of good communication and transferring of the information.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst there are some assurances around where we had tried to proactively engage when somebody didn't attend as their last contact, we know that the people that didn't attend as that last contact weren't of that client group. And whilst we also know from primary colleagues, some of our clinicians working in primary care, they felt there wasn't an issue in that area. We couldn't triangulate that with our systems and processes because it's an area we need to strengthen. So it is absolutely something we need to work on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Mark, I think you've got a comment on the point that Chris has just raised, then I'll bring Di in for a further question from her, Mark.
Excellent, thanks, Chair. So good morning, everyone. Mark Platts, I'm the Chief Finance Officer, but I'm also the Trust Senior Information and Risk Officer. So I just wanted to come in on the comment around the information sharing. So completely agree, it's really, really important. But again, from an information governance and a data protection viewpoint, we've really got to be mindful not to overshare as well, because that can actually kind of hinder progress moving forward as well. But a really important point, but I just wanted to make that point that we need to balance that level of information that we do share. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Di.
Yeah, sorry, Sharon, for a second question. Obviously, area of interest for me, Di Bailey, non-exec. I just wanted to come back on really around the training and development for staff in relation to the assertive outreach way of working. And I think Sarah made a really valid point this morning from a carer's perspective in terms of, you know, one of the things that really made a difference was the attitude of staff working with her daughter. And that is so important in this space. And I think while we wait for some of those processes to get in place around the sharing of information, anything that we can do in the training and development space to support this, not just our staff, but staff that we partner with, I think is really important. So I'd assume that there might be something going through People Committee, but I don't know whether that is the right assumption to make.
So what we have got is a relational practice group, which is looking very much at exactly what you've just said, Di, and fabulously it's led by a range of professional disciplines. I've recently taken on the executive sponsor for that role, and our trust lead for trauma-informed care is part of that work as well. So I think that will be quite instrumental in how we take that forward. What I will do though is go back and look at how we provide those updates and how we weave that together, because I don't believe, but I will double check, that we've got sort of a formal reporting route on some of that work. And I think given the other areas of our strategy and also Sarah's point around the Living Within Our Means programme and impact on care, I think it will be really important that we have got line of sight on that. So thank you, Di.
Thank you.
Thanks, Di. A couple of observations to bring this really important conversation to a conclusion. Sharon, first of all, to echo what Di said, really strongly commend the methodology, and please pass our thanks on to Nick for leading this piece of work. There's a real issue here in all of this for me around governance. So one of the criticisms of colleagues in Nottinghamshire around the way in which the Callacane case was handled is that the board had insufficient insight and therefore insufficient curiosity around incidents that could have been signals of future harm. And I think the challenge for us is to make sure that whatever reporting processes we put in place, they are sufficient to spark appropriate curiosity on the part of the board and subcommittees. So when I say board, I mean board and its committees, as a whole. So I think we need to stay focused on that. And I think part of the answer is to make reporting routine, but it's to reach beyond, it's to stop it just becoming routine, and it's to prompt the board to ask the right questions. And I think to Chris Wright's point about information sharing, I think for me this is a really good illustration of the fact that we've got two kind of key tasks around the patients identified here. One of them is treatment and support, but the other is managing risk, and our wider duty to the public around risk management means that needs to inform the way in which we share information and the way that we manage these cases and the way in which we report on them to board. And I think one of the criticisms of our colleagues in Nottinghamshire is that they didn't quite get that balance right, so we need to make sure that we do. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for really excellent report. Thank you for leading us through that conversation. We'll move on then, if we may, to item 3.3. I'm going to take this item and then have a very brief break. So we'll take item 3.3, which is the learning from deaths report. Girish.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Girish Kunigiri. I'm the Chief Medical Officer. This is a quarterly report on learning from deaths, which is a requirement for the board to be aware of in terms of how we are doing in terms of identification of patients who have sadly died, and how we are investigating, and also how we are learning as an organization. This paper was discussed in detail in the quality committee, so I have just brought here for the highlights. I know that there are a couple of people who are new, particularly from the public, so for the benefit of them, as an organization, we are expected to review all the deaths which have happened for patients who are currently under our care, or those who were discharged 6 months prior to the incident. And we have a robust mechanism in terms of obtaining such information from different sources, triaging them, and also those who meet the criteria as per the guidance. We do everything to investigate them and to learn, and we make sure that the family members are involved where appropriate in terms of those investigations. So I'll not go into the details of the numbers, but what you can see is that majority of the people who sadly die are because of natural reasons, and those who fulfill the criteria for further investigations, so they are taken on our investigation list, and then we do a thorough investigation, as I said. So in terms of the learning, a lot of learning happens through this, which helps in terms of us continuously improving our care to our patients as well as the carers. And we have a different mechanism in terms of how we make sure that the learning doesn't happen just within the teams, but it is across the organizations as well. So we have different means of sharing that information. And I can assure that the variation in the deaths which we have seen in this quarter is in line with the previous quarters, what we have seen in our organization. I generally bring a brief report with regard to learning from deaths for people who suffer from learning disability and autistic people as well. But for this quarter, which is generally produced by the ICP, the report is not yet ready, and it will be discussed in the quality committee once it is ready, and it will bring to this group once we have the information. So I'll stop here, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Girish. We've got a couple of colleagues who want to come in. Di first.
Hi, Bailey, non-exec. Girish, thank you for the report. I think I've raised this before, so apologies for raising it again, but I'm just mindful of the comment that Sarah Whiteman made when presenting the quality committee papers about the work that we're doing around serious mental illness and health checks and trying to improve the life chances for some of our most vulnerable people. And so I did just want to flag again that I think it would be really helpful to understand this population in terms of any health inequalities that might be there. Now, whether that's appropriately done on a quarterly basis or whether we do it, because obviously they're not huge numbers, but whether or not at some point we take a look at that, or whether indeed quality committee is seeing that, I don't know. But I just welcome some thoughts really about that triangulation of information, so that we don't lose an important data source. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Di. I think that's really, really helpful. I think in the next board development program, I think we have an agenda with regard to PCREF. So that is very timely, and I can bring some data, what is available. But again, as you rightly raised, because the numbers are so small, we can present what data we have. But in terms of what this means to the wider population needs to be analyzed with some caution. Thank you, Di. That's really helpful.
Thanks, Di. Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Girish. So Amy Beaton, Chief People Officer. Girish, in the paper, it references the new forum of continuous quality improvement and triangulation of learning, but doesn't really add how this will add to the process that we adopt around learning from death. So I just wondered if you could explain how that forum now will be part of this process and what we expect to see adding to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully Sharon will be able to help me with this. I think in terms of what is happening at the moment is all the learning which we have because of different reasons, they obviously go to the DDoGs, and those information which needs to go across the organization, they are then disseminated to that through different routes. And the second thing is we also have mortality surveillance meeting, which I chair, and we discuss in detail with regard to some of the serious cases who have sadly died. And then and we use the same route in terms of how the learning is disseminated. So what was absent before is in terms of how we use this information in terms of triangulating with the other data what we have within the organizations. So in terms of going forward, some of these learnings which we have from different sources are coming to this triangulation group, and then we are trying to look at how this will link with some of the work what we are doing. This is I mean, as you understand, Amy, this group has started only recently, so we need to have a good grip of this in terms of going forward. I'm sure Sharon will have more details. Thank you.
Sharon, do you want to come in on that point? Yeah.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. Sharon Harvey, Chief Nursing Officer. So as Girish has said, it's a relatively new group, the continuous quality improvement and triangulation of learning. But the purpose is to do exactly that, to bring all the different elements of learning together. So we will be bringing together our patient safety information, learning from complaints, learning from compliments, but also the learning from deaths information. Or we will also be holding to account through that where actions haven't been followed up or delivered. So we've got that line of sight. All of the divisions within the organisation are represented there, as well as our central team. So it enables a lot more of that curiosity and learning. And then there'll be a biannual report that comes up through Quality Committee that demonstrates that learning, how we're pulled together, of which learning from deaths will be one element of it. I think it'd be really helpful to then get feedback from the board and enable that sort of curiosity to say what else we'd like to pull through from that and to see where we go. But it is fairly newly formed, but I am confident that we'll strengthen our processes through that, including the learning from deaths process.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Amy. Sarah Connery.
Thank you. Thank you, Girish, for the report. And I got a few points, but Sharon's covered one of them, which is around it's not just the process, but it's what is the actual learning from going through all of these assurance processes and reviews, and that's obviously not captured, but that's a really great, I think, better way, because that's triangulated learning then, isn't it, coming through to the board. But I think there is something about getting the balance right for the board between the detail that's discussed at Quality Committee versus the public facing report that comes here. And I'm very mindful about the Lampard review in terms of Essex partnership and learning from deaths processes and assurances that hadn't sort of quite worked well there, and what we need to be mindful of here at LPFT. So, you know, we can pick up a conversation on that, I think, and maybe with Karen as well, around what actually gets reported, because the context of the remaining deaths did not fall within review requirements. As you've said, Girish, I think that actually does need to be properly narrated in the report, even though we might be at risk of duplicating us. I think it's really important for this really important topic. But I just wanted to build on Di's point, and it ties into my other points around the themes. You know, the patient story today was about that support for the cohort to attend appointments, which helps with prevention and early intervention. You know, ultimately will help, you know, people with serious and enduring mental illness live a longer, happier, healthier life. So it is really important, I think, that we're able to tease that through into this report as well, where possible. Appreciating that integrating those bits of data can be a bit of a challenge, but they were just my challenges, and I'm happy to support moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I think in future we can make it more explicit about the natural deaths, which are more common, you know, cause for deaths in this group, like in any other group, and we can make it more clear. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Girish. Welcome the suggestion from Sarah that we do a little bit of work to refine the way that we report on these really important issues as between quality committee and board, and that we're getting the right insights at board level. But thank you, Girish, for the report this morning, which is really helpful.
Thank you.
I'm going to suggest, colleagues, if that's okay, we take a short break. It's now 10:30. Can we reconvene in 10 minutes at 22:11? Thank you very much. Right, thank you very much, colleagues. Let's restart. I think we're on item 4.1 on the agenda, which is to highlight an exception report from the People Committee and the annual report for approval. Tim.
Thank you, Kevin. So Tim Harry, Non-Exec Director and Chair of the People Committee. So starting with the highlight and exception report. As usual at our meeting in April, we started with a staff story. And this time we heard about the latest development in our, what I believe an impressive array of staff networks. And this was with the recent formation of a FACE network. And although we could see, you know, although new, we could see certainly the potential for the positive impact that it will make. So we look forward to hearing further updates on that. I just wanted to touch on two main themes to the meeting rather than maybe the individual papers. One was around how the living within our means and also the future operating model work for the Trust will and is impacting on the People Committee work. So, for example, how new roles will be needed for new ways of working, and how these will help contribute to addressing our financial challenges, etc. And I think that plays into your point, Kevin, around the risks for the People Committee are changing, and it was something we discussed at the meeting, and I'm sure it will be different with the review of the BAF that is underway. The second theme was really around cross-committee working in terms of mutual support and interaction. And there were two areas here. One was around the Performance Committee, which highlighted the levels of staff absence. And we had some quite deep discussions over two meetings, actually, regarding the actions that were already in place to address this sort of area. And I think we got some good assurance around that, not least because the staff absence figures have improved. But obviously, it's something we need to keep an eye on. The second one was around the interaction with the Audit and Risk Committee. And this time we actually had two of the internal audit reports within the document pack for the People Committee to help frame some of our discussions. One was around appraisals, and Amy Beaton, our Chief People Officer, gave us a really good update in terms of all the actions that were placed there. The second one was around job planning, and we had a separate paper from our Chief Medical Officer that gave us further assurance around progress within this sort of area. There were obviously some other important things on the agenda, but they're covered elsewhere separately on this particular agenda, so I'll leave those to others. Moving on to the annual report, which came with the annual self-assessment. And I would say, whilst both were very positive and confirmed in particular that the committee had met its terms of reference, we did discuss some of the areas where we felt there could be some improvements. And one area in particular was around how could we get greater value from the reports and so on, and how they are presented. And that's something that I believe that Karen touches on later in the agenda on item 7.4 around proportionate governance arrangements. So Kevin, I think that's all really I wanted to cover within that, but obviously open for questions and comments.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for the really helpful report on those additional comments. I'll see if there are any comments or questions from colleagues. If there aren't, please can colleagues indicate in chat whether or not they're happy to approve the annual report. There you go, Tim. No comments or questions. Thank you very much for that. And the annual report is approved. We will move on then to item 4.2, Amy, National Staff Survey, and the Bank Staff Survey results from 2024. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Kevin. So Amy Beaton, Chief People Officer. And yeah, I'm presenting this paper today, having taken it as read. I would just confirm, as per the highlight and exception report of People Committee, that the survey and the reports associated with our results have been discussed in depth at People Committee prior to coming. So there's been confirm and challenge around engagement cycles and actions. And that the committee did utilise these results, as mentioned in the earlier board assurance framework paper, around adjusting risk for scoring due to the sustained results we've now seen in this survey. So we have been keen to push the completion of this survey by our staff. It is the largest staff engagement tool we have available to us, and it also provides helpful benchmarking against national peer organisations and all NHS providers. So it's really good at assessing our performance and also for us to identify learning. And we're really pleased with our increased response rate, so that it enables us to be able to rely upon these results. So we've seen that improvement over the last 2 years now in that response rate. So, you know, that we can really use this as a tool to drive improvement. So I hope the board would agree there's much to celebrate in these survey results. The completion of the survey was at a time when we were having difficult financial conversations in terms of large scale cost improvement programmes. And I think the fact that we have maintained high performance in results shows the strength of our culture in terms of how in-year challenges do not automatically mean we see a resulting dip in how staff view working in the organisation. So all 100 questions are grouped under 9 areas shown in that report, and there's the fact that LPFT scored highest in 5 of those 9 when compared nationally with peer trusts, but then also top in 3 of these 9 areas across all 210 NHS providers. I think is something to be really celebrated. So there's Lots of detail in the report around our specific results, which, as I said, has been discussed in People Committee and I'll take as read. So I think what I want to highlight is also how we use these results. And we have really made a marked progress around how we engage on these results and then how we ensure we take action that will sustainably improve areas. And I'm going to be honest that I don't think that we have always been in this space. So the paper does highlight, we triangulate this survey with other intelligence from multiple sources so that we prioritise our focus and resources where it will really make a difference. And what's really important in what we've developed is how we close the feedback loops, so that our staff see the worth of completing it. And I think what's come through board today is about learning quite a lot. And I feel that we've really pushed on this kind of you've talked, we've listened approach, so that they do really feel we're hearing them, and they also see the worth in completing the survey. And we've got more mature in our approach around not just rolling out brand new action plans every year. And if some of our previous focus needs that maintaining year on year to embed what we're doing, we are doing that rather than dropping a last year action plan and focusing elsewhere. That said, some of the results are showing the need to focus across multiple years. And we're also, as part of this process on how we're using these results, we're driving ownership and accountability throughout the organisation, rather than purely sitting within a centralised organisational development team, which is again, something more recently quite new in our approach. So we're doing this by supporting and making sure that the right tools and governance is in place so that managers, individual staff members can really own this at a local level, as well as organisational and intervention by centralised teams. I think I'll just finish by highlighting in the paper, it does show where our efforts are focused. And I think that I would just want to emphasise our commitment to our staff safety work. As you'll see, the results show the need for this action. We've not seen a statistically significant shift from previous years in the occurrence of bullying and harassment, violence and aggression and discrimination, although we have seen a statistically significant decline in reporting. But this piece of work has also been referenced today in papers around Performance Committee and our IPR. So I just did want to touch on it. This is an example of where we're driving accountability and ownership throughout the organisation. So we have had dedicated resource on this agenda initially, and we're now embedding permanent and sustainable roles and responsibilities around this through our Living Within Our Means work. We have already, and we are continuing to launch campaigns that target both staff and patients around our expectations in terms of bullying and harassment, violence and aggression and discrimination. And this involves posters in staff and patient areas. We have board members doing a lot of communications, both video and written, on this work around our expectations and reporting. And we've done a more targeted comms to our managers in this space as well as the establishment of a single point of access for staff safety support. Despite it being provided by multiple teams across the organisation, we want it to be easy to access, effective and timely. The paper does also acknowledge that we are learning is a domain that we do not score as well as others in. And I think, as I said, we've already mentioned today around the establishment of a continuous quality improvement and learning forum, the utilisation of Patient Lived Experience Council, Carers Council, but this domain also encompasses individual staff learning. And so we've identified our focus this year in this area around a number of actions detailed in the paper to shift that domain nearer to the performance of our others. So you'll see a shift in running of our inspirational leadership programme to actually focus more on management essentials training. Whilst the paper does cover bank staff, I will say actually we're not mandated to survey our bank staff because our numbers of bank staff don't dictate that we do, but we have chosen to do that. But we recognise that our response rate is not high, 15.66%, and we're understanding why we've seen that drop from last year in this area so that we can increase this response rate. There's some good results in there, but in terms of relying on them, we really need to improve that response rate. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. A couple of quick observations, if I may, before bring in a couple of comments from colleagues. The first is absolutely we should celebrate the results of this survey, which reflect, obviously extremely well on the trust. So, that's really commendable. I think you're right too, Amy, to highlight the fact that as we go through what might be quite significant changes over the next year or so, we need to pay attention to how those impact on our staff and the way that they feel about the organisation and the role. One thing struck me from the report, and particularly the analysis of the free text bits, is about people feeling that communication from senior leadership is patchy. I think that obviously it's almost a trite, so obvious it's a trite point that communication is going to be really critical, as we move forward with the change programs that we've got. And I would just urge colleagues, when they think they've communicated enough, they almost certainly haven't, and communicate and then communicate some more, even if we're not telling people anything that we think they already don't know. So even communication that says we haven't got anything else to say, it's just keeping that communication consistent, purposeful and frequent. So I just want to highlight the fact that I think that's a really important dimension. So let me bring in colleagues, having done my bit. So Di.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Amy. And just to echo really Kevin's commendations of the report, Amy, I think, admittedly, there are still some areas that are on our radar, but I think this is an absolute step change for us and represents that real sort of shift in organisational culture. So thank you to you and the team for the really good work that's gone into doing this. I would make no apologies about sticking with action plans. I think continue to be brave, and if it ain't broke and it needs to continue, then don't try and fix it, because I think culture change does take a long time to embed. And so some of these things are not quick fixes by any means, and I think staff really value that. I think picking up Kevin's point about communication, there's something for me about why are we in this position that we're in, and I think what I took away from your presentation of the report was that we've put the resource and capacity into moving closer to where we've known we've got issues. And that I think is really important. I think it's going to be really important in the forthcoming period, where we've got some difficult stuff to do. And I think the only way to do that difficult stuff is to do it in a way that aligns with the trust values. And I think that does require us to stay in close to our workforce, and in all the ways that you've described, really. So I suppose it's just a plea from me, really, that as an organisation we continue to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Di.
I think that last point is absolutely right, and Amy, all of our staff that I talk to know that we've got some difficult stuff to do, and they want to understand what that difficult stuff is, and for us to have a meaningful conversation with them about it. And I know that's our intention. I'm not suggesting otherwise. Ian.
Excuse me. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, Amy. I thought it was a really good report. The bulk of the point I was going to make has been picked up largely by Kevin. It was that free text comment really about the senior management bit, but there's just a little bit sort of still hanging around for me on it, and that is, can you just tell me whether that was picked up in the previous year's survey, and can you give me some idea of the scale of that sort of comment? Is it just popping out of one particular area, or is it a theme?
Okay, so in terms of in the body of the report, is it the management and leadership point 3, poor community? Yeah. I don't think in terms of senior leadership it's been in the previous staff survey. We have had what we have had and what has come through previous surveys is around variation of leadership. So that has come through. So not necessarily specifically around communication, but about variation. And therefore, a lot of our interventions have been targeted at trying to reduce that variation so that the things that we can do to educate and equip managers in order that we can get a far more consistency across and the staff experience is more consistent across rather than variant to where teams are. But the communication hasn't been a theme that we pulled out previously, no. But it's part of it, isn't it? It's part of a management leadership role to do. So it is an absolute area in which we're focusing. We are identifying that it can cascade down to a point and then get stuck. And therefore, we're trying to identify what we need to do to make sure that cascade flows. And as part of what Kevin said, you know, we are saying communicate even when you've got nothing new to communicate, particularly when times are hard. And we're really, as a executive team, having those conversations on a regular basis, particularly around this living within our means programme of work, you know, setting up dedicated pages on Sharon, but also committing to frequent comms coming out of it, even when there is nothing new to communicate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Tim's got a comment specifically on this. Before he makes it, though, just to make the point, Amy, that there is certainly patchiness about communication. There's also kind of patchiness about perceived visibility of senior leaders, and I think there's a slight distinction, isn't there, between communication and visibility, and I think they're both equally important in the context that we're working in. Tim, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So Tim Harry, non-exec director, and yeah, fully support what Amy's just said. I think, Ian, though, if you triangulate with the freedom to speak up, I think it has come up under there. I can't say exactly what frequency, but it probably is most times there's an element of it or an inference around it, if not specifically about communications. But certainly the variation in leadership is something that we have seen, both from the freedom to speak up and the surveys. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Amy, for such a comprehensive report, and absolutely much to be celebrated. But as you know, a real mindful focus on the learning element, where we're just outside the top 10, aren't we? But I think there's something for me about, this might even be more for Sharon than yourself, but around there's organisational learning and then there's personal development learning. But what I do hear from staff on visits is that they're at a very micro level, they might be involved in an incident and be interviewed and take part in that process, but then they don't hear anything back. So I don't know whether that's something that we can make sure it's sort of attended to in the relevant action plans on that. But that is feedback that I've had from a number of frontline staff. So just wanted to make that point that it was covered either in that management training or in the action plan. Thank you.
Yeah, we can do that. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. Sharon Harvey, Chief Nursing Officer. And just to add, in relation to the triangulation of learning group that we talked about earlier, I'll ask the chair of that group to pick up an action on how we share the learning, whether thematically or whether specifically on each incident through the work we do. And also when we talked in the quality committee highlights and exceptions report around the work we still need to do around our patient safety work and implementing PSERF, I think it fits with that. So I'm happy to take an action on how we do that and how we pick up sharing learning back. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. That sounds really helpful.
And if I just come back in on that, Kevin, you know, it was an area identified as, you know, there were only 3 areas that we saw a statistically significant decline in, and feedback on the changes made following incidents was one of them. So as Sharon has said, that has been picked up through the quality route already with the directors of nursing. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks again for an excellent report and really well presented. Thank you very much. We'll move on then, shall we, to item, where am I? Item 5.2, no, 5.1. No, I'm not. I'm on 4.3. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Apologies. To the Guardian of Safe Working report, Girish.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You're definitely on 4.3 now. So I'm Dr. Girish Kuniri. I'm the Chief Medical Officer. Again, probably this is another brief report. Happy to have the comment if you want something more of this. So this is a quarterly report on assuring the board on Guardian of Safe Working. Just again, for the benefit of those who are from the public, there is a requirement for all the organizations to bring this report to assure that as an organization, we ensure that all the trainee doctors who are now called as resident doctors, you know, their working conditions are in line with terms and conditions of the service as per their contract who are in training. So this report briefly discusses about where we are with it. Again, in terms of resident doctors, it's a broad term. There are different kinds of doctors in every organization who are in training, and generally most of these doctors rotate every 4 to 6 months. And the doctors are posted in any organization from the deanery, which oversees the doctors across whole of the Midlands. So the numbers does vary in terms of how many are recruited for the training every year. As a result of that, when we allocate the timetable for the doctors, invariably there will be some gaps because we never get the full 100% doctors each year. And as a result of that, we ask the existing doctors to cover some of those gaps. And we need to make sure that even when we are asking doctors to cover some of those gaps, particularly when they are on call, if it breaches their terms and conditions, then they report through what is called as exception reports. But I'm glad to say that in our organization, we receive very few of them. Like in this quarter, we received only 3, but this is mainly because of last moment sickness, which generally happens, and we ask the existing doctor to continue until we make an alternative arrangement, and we compensate by time of leave for this. And the Guardian of Safe Working has the power to find the organizations if we are receiving more exception reports, and as an organizations, we have never received anyone. And also to assure to the board that as an organization, we have put numerous measures to hear from our doctors at different forums like the Resident Doctors Forum, working with the DME, the educational supervisors, the clinical supervisors, so that we have different ways of getting the information from the doctors, and we generally get very good feedback. So in essence, this report says that we are complying with all the terms, and our working environment is generally considered as positive to some of our doctors. So in terms of going forward, we will continue with what we hear from the doctors, which is on a continuous improvement cycle, if I can say. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Girish. Thank you for a comprehensive report. Open it to questions or comments from colleagues. I don't see any, so thank you very much. Thanks very much, Girish, for that.
Thank you.
And we'll move on then, because I was getting ahead of myself before, giddy with excitement, obviously, to item 5.1, which is the highlight and exceptions report and the annual report from the Best Use of Resources Committee. Chris.
Thank you, Kevin. Chris Wright, Non-Executive Director and Chair of the Best Use of Resources Committee. I'm conscious that this is a highlight report from a committee that last met on April the 3rd, I think, and we're now nearing the end of the first quarter of the new financial year. That said, the committee for the last 3 years has been heavily focused on eradicating the underlying deficit that this trust faces, and the current financial context has, I guess, accelerated the urgency of that. So much of the focus of Best Use of Resources Committee will interface with the Living Within Our Means work. And so the committee in question, again, focused on the sustainability agenda for LPFT. In doing so, we looked at some corporate benchmarking data, which demonstrated some interesting findings. And some of those findings are uncomfortable because they show that we're relatively expensive in a number of areas. And we can explain that away by discussing the methodology of corporate benchmarking and the size of LPFT compared with the size of many other organisations who we are compared against. But we were very conscious of not wanting to use that as an excuse, but to dive deeper and understand more effectively where our costs are and what we need to do about that. And as I said, that's been brought to light by the Living Within Our Means work, which is ongoing. We also, outside of the specific issue around finance and managing our resources, we have been receiving regular updates on our estates programme, and really good progress being made there. We felt assured that much of the concerns that had been identified in earlier meetings were now being actively managed. And finally, in relation to this particular meeting, we received the annual statement of readiness in relation to emergency preparedness, resilience and response statement from Chris Higgins, who oversees that for us, and we were happy to sign that off. With regards to the annual report, we also marked our own homework and done a self-assessment of the committee, and amazingly, we were pleased with our progress. The committee met actually 9 times during the last year. We feel that we have overseen all the areas under our area of oversight and address those with a degree of decent consideration. So we recommend the annual report as a accurate reflection of the work of the committee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks for the update. Thanks for the work that the committee continues to do, especially alongside the Living Within Our Means programme. Don't see any comments or questions from colleagues, although I can see that at least one colleague is busy typing, so I don't know whether that's going to be a question or a comment.
It's the anticipation.
It is. It is the anticipation. Meanwhile, while I wait for that, it'd be good if colleagues could indicate in chat whether or not they're happy to approve the annual report. That's yes, and I don't see any questions or comments, Chris. So thank you very much for the report, and as I say, thank you very much for the continued work of the committee. We will move on then, if we may, to item 5.2, which is highlight and exceptions report and annual report from the Performance Committee. Di.
Thanks, Kevin. So Di Bailey, Chair of Performance Committee. As always, in Performance Committee, we took a look at the metrics within the Integrated Performance Report, which Mark will speak to in a minute. But just to note, we remain in an improved position, or we did as of last week, around our out-of-area placements. So I think a couple of days before the committee met, we were at 0, and then I think it had just crept up to 1 by the time the committee met. But I think the committee were assured that all the work that's gone on around reducing our inappropriate out-of-area placements is actually having a positive impact. We had a further conversation about the balanced scorecard, and I note that this was on the action schedule. So just by way of an update, I think we are expecting to see a draft before the next Performance Committee for comment. But I think what we're also seeing is cross triangulation of information between performance committees and other committees, which will obviously inform that balanced scorecard going forward. So, for instance, one of the things that we talked about in the Performance Committee was the reduction in staff sickness, which Tim has also mentioned in terms of the work that's been going on in People Committee around that. So that gives you an example of cross-committee working, and there was lots of reference made to the Living Within Our Means programme around financial performance. 2 areas that I just wanted to highlight, really. So we spent quite a lot of time at Performance Committee talking about organisational culture in relation to 2 areas, particularly relating to inpatient services. So one of those is in relation to the work that is going on within the Vales and the focus really on finding the appropriate therapeutic model, I think, for some of our most vulnerable and challenging service users who need that level of intensive support. But we also noted that across our inpatient services, we were seeing some reports of particularly concerning racial discrimination towards staff in particular, and we noted that we noted both sort of cultural impacts really on performance, but particularly around the reports of racism. We wanted to reflect that in relation to the organisation's risk, particularly recognising that this was something that had been raised previously through staff survey results, but so we had quite a conversation about that, and obviously we want to ensure that that is reflected in board noting that as that conversation. The other area that we spent quite a bit of time talking about was the those people who are on our inpatient services and are clinically ready for discharge. I think we heard from Sarah earlier in the story this morning that people spend a lot of time in our inpatient services, and we recognise that some of that is often inappropriate, and the importance of the step down provision through Ashley House and other means of enabling people to spend less time in the least restrictive environments. And then finally, we noted that we'd had atypically for Performance Committee some admissions from our learning disability populations, and one of the reasons that we noted that was because we could identify that it could be backtracked really to a single point of risk, if you like, or single point of failure, and it was just something that we wanted to flag to board, particularly in the light of the support services restructure work going forward to try and mitigate against that risk at all possible. In terms of the annual committee report, this was the first annual committee report for the Performance Committee, because we have indeed just about been running for just over a year now. I don't know whether it seems like much longer or much less. Colleagues will probably have a view about that, but certainly for the time that we've been running, and considering that during that time we've had various reviews of our terms of reference to make sure that we were adding value as a committee, we felt we were pleased with the results, and we were happy to send that forward to board. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Di. Thanks very much for the report, and for the value that the Performance Committee is undoubtedly adding by focusing on some really important elements of what the Trust is doing. So I'm really grateful for that. Let me see if there are any comments or questions from colleagues. Don't see any, so can I ask colleagues if they're happy to approve the annual report? Excellent, thank you very much. Thanks again, Di. We'll move on then to, because we've still got a bit of ground to cover, we'll move on to item 5.3, which is the Integrated Performance Report. Mark.
Excellent, thanks, Kevin. So good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Platts, I'm the Chief Finance Officer, and I'm going to be presenting today's Integrated Performance Report alongside Eve Baird, our Chief Operating Officer, who I'll be handing over to shortly. So we're going to present it slightly differently today, and in spirit of learning and evolving. So we're going to focus the update around looking at our strategic objectives as a board. So I'm going to pick up outstanding people and best use of resources, and then Eve's going to come in and pick up a couple of the areas. So in terms of outstanding people, Amy's already picked up on this in a couple of discussions as well, but some really important workforce improvements to note for March towards the end of last year. So our vacancy rate has reduced down to under 10%, and we peaked at just nearly 15% back in May 2024. So some real improvements there. Turnover has reduced, so that's great as well. So turnover is down to just over 8.63%, and also sickness absence is down to 4.79%. So the combination of the three of those kind of links us right back to the board story at the start of the session around, that really does start to help give us a stabilised, substantive based staffing model. So whilst obviously those areas are not zero, it is really starting to see an improvement and less reliance on bank and agency moving forward. So some positive discussions there. I was also going to mention the Employee Assistance Programme, but we've already discussed that today. And I did just want to link in as well a bit of the ongoing development of the Staff Safety Hub that has been talked around today. So really important single point of access for any staff member who follows an event that may cause them any harm or distress. So that work is continuing, and the hub will be evolving as we move forward, but really demonstrates our commitment to helping staff feel physically and psychologically safe at work. In terms of our best use of resources performance, so as I mentioned, this is all March data, so this reports our year-end position. So as an organisation, our year-end surplus was just over £1 million. Now that was against a planned position of £2.2 million, and the key variances around that were around cost pressures associated to the pay award that was issued to the NHS. It wasn't necessarily fully funded, and also we had some restructure costs for a mutually agreed resignation scheme that we processed during last year as well. So two allowable areas of adjustment there, but we were able to absorb them given our cash balances. However, colleagues may have picked up during the discussions today a lot of reference to our Living Within Our Means programme. So the reason we're implementing that programme is because our plan for this year is not looking like we're going to be reporting a surplus. We've actually planned a financial deficit. So as we move forward in board and bring this year's financial performance report into that, I can give further details as we move forward. Real positive work on agency spend. So that has reduced down to 2.5% of staffing costs, and our target for the year last year was 3.2. So we've again achieved that target. Really positive work this year again to even bring that down further, which, linking it back to Sarah and our chief executive report, we're looking healthy to meet the kind of the next challenge for this year of that 30% reduction. So some great work there, particularly around medical consultant recruitments. So important points to note on that one. In terms of innovation, I just wanted to pick up a highlight that we're moving forward and trying to maximise the use of our estate. So on one of our sites in Lincoln, we've introduced some solar panels on the roof. So had some really good days where actually at points we've been meeting all of our electricity needs for that unit and that ward through solar energy. So really, really positive that we're reducing our carbon footprint and the need for utilising electricity off the grid. So some really, really positive ones there. I just wanted to link to patient experience and the metric 28, which is on page 11, around our estate being safe, compliant and therapeutic. So this metric does remain kind of greyed out at the minute, but we are undergoing some external assessment of our estate. So these 6 facet surveys are good industry practice and allow us to get an objective external assessment of how safe our estates, and actually more importantly, what do we need to do to further improve and moving forward. So as that work is completed in the next couple of months, I'll continue to report that through as well. And the final one I did want to mention, and it is under best use resources because there's a financial value attached to it, but Di's just picked up this on the performance committee update. 32 patients clinically ready for discharge at the point of writing this. So there's obviously a whole lot of quality and experience that we need to understand from a performance viewpoint on that. But also there's a cost associated to that, because that means that we're not able to help other patients and moving forward. So actually linking a financial value to that, it's just nearly £1.4 million. So that's potential money that we could utilise elsewhere and help support more patients. So really highlights the need for us to do that work, working with system partners and increase that sort of supported living provision that Di mentioned as well. So if it's okay, Kevin, slightly new today, I'm going to hand over to Eve to walk us through the rest, if that's okay.
Well, let's take questions on your bit of it first, Mark, if that's okay. Otherwise, we might lose the thread. I've got a quick one on vacancy, turnover, and sickness, and it is just to question how we benchmark on those metrics, because for all 3 of them, it's very unlikely that we'll ever get to 0, but it would be helpful to know what the kind of best in class that we might be aiming for is.
Yeah, certainly. And we do kind of report that through a system perspective in a lot of detail through our system workforce committee, and we do benchmark favourably against that. But I know that Amy and the people team also look at us nationally, and I don't know the exact details in terms of that, but we are consistently favourable on that perspective as well. So we can make sure we can link some other national numbers in as we go forward.
Yeah, I think as we further develop the way that we report performance, I think having some benchmarks around that would be helpful. My instinct is that we do benchmark favourably, but it'd be just nice to see it in black and white. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Just for a bit more regional context, we do benchmark with our East Midlands Alliance partners as well, but we've just had to chase up because we haven't had the report since January. So that always gives us a bit more of a meaningful context in terms of mental health providers in the East Midlands, but we are chasing that up, so we'll be able to include it in future reports. Thank you.
That's helpful. Thanks, Sarah. I don't see any other questions or comments on your section, Mark. Thanks. So let's have Eve.
Thanks, Mark and Kevin. Eve Baird, Chief Operating Officer. So I'm going to pick up the elements of the Integrated Performance Report that discuss outstanding quality. That's including patient experience and outcomes, and healthy population, including access. So in terms of outstanding quality, we've fully rolled out the mild to moderate eating disorder pathway across Lincolnshire PCNs. That's a really significant step for Lincolnshire, because it means that people with mild to moderate eating disorders are now going to be receiving the support that they need through specialists trained in eating disorders rather than through our generic talking therapist service. So that gets us much closer to, you know, what's nationally recommended as good practice. We've seen a significant reduction in the number of individuals who come into our health-based place of safety that stay for over 24 hours. This is in part related to the better flow we've got across our wards at the moment, meaning that people are not held in those health-based places of safety while we try and find them an appropriate bed. So that's significant progress. And we've also, as we talked about through the highlights report from Performance Committee, seen a sustained much lower number of people being admitted to out of area placements. At the time of reporting, we did have a period of time where we were on 0, which is really positive and what we're aspiring to. We know that we will struggle to keep that consistently at 0 until we do some of the other work we've already got identified around appropriate step down accommodation, and that's very much linked to the clinically ready for discharge challenges that we've talked about. 91% of the individuals surveyed said they'd had their experience of care was good or very good, and 87% felt involved in their care. So they're really positive metrics for us and something that we're really proud of. Some of our challenges in terms of quality, we've already referred to. We've got ongoing quality and safety concerns on the Vales. There has been an intervention and review team that have been deployed there since the 12th of May. Their 4 weeks on the ward is completed this Friday, and they're going to be producing a full report with recommendations on how we progress to make sure that we address those concerns and can provide care in a sustainable way moving forward for some of those really complex individuals that we're supporting. We've also got a challenge in terms of the number of individuals with a learning disability or autistic individuals who are admitted to mental health inpatient services. That number doesn't really reflect some of the huge progress we've made in discharging people who have been in hospital for an extended period of time. And we've got some really positive examples of system approaches across health and social care, where we've supported people who have been in hospital for years to transition to living in the community, which is really positive. The increasing numbers we're seeing are people with a learning disability or autistic individuals who are being admitted to our acute mental health wards. And we've got a specific action plan to understand where we could have done something differently to prevent that need for an admission at an earlier stage and get the support right in the community, as well as looking at how we support those individuals to be supported in the community as soon as possible once their inpatient stay has met their needs. In terms of healthy population and access, some of the achievements, we've got the rollout of Luminova, which is an online platform for children and young people to support with mild anxiety. That has really significantly boosted our children and young people's access rates as children and young people across Lincolnshire are accessing that in high volume. It's really positive. We've got our community hubs and connectors we're completing an evaluation to understand their social return on the investment into those. And we've had a new head of housing appointed that's starting to help us work on really unpicking where the discharge barriers for our patients are related to housing and accommodation, how we might work together across that health and care system. In terms of access, people may have noticed we're now reporting on the 4-week wait, and the metrics have changed, which has therefore changed our level of compliance that we're reporting. It hasn't changed the service we're offering, so I just wanted to highlight that. NHSE now, particularly on the children and young people's 4-week wait, are only stopping the clock on that wait when within the patient's record we have evidence of a suitable contact, a completed care plan and an outcome measure. Now, what that's meant for us is that our performance against that metric has dipped to 7%, where previously we've always been at over 80%. Previously, we were measured on when people started to receive help, and that was measured in the form of when we made contact with them, when we started interventions. The introduction of a new way of measuring it has changed our performance, and we really need to think about what that means, because some of the children and young people and the adults through CMHT that come to us, actually we need to do much more complex assessments and detailed assessments that are going to take longer than 4 weeks, and that is what will inform a care plan. So we really need to think about how we meaningfully engage with our patients to make sure people are getting the right help and the right support, but also how that's then reflected in our performance reporting. And a really positive in terms of waiting times, our A&E referrals that are seen within 1 hour were at 92, nearly 93% against a national average of 66%. So we know as a system we're doing really well with our work across urgent care. In terms of the long-term plan KPIs, and then I will finish, we have exceeded the KPIs in terms of talking therapies access, reliable improvement for talking therapies and perinatal access. We've met or we're close to target for dementia diagnosis and EIP weights. We are underperforming on our CYP eating disorder waiting times. What we know about that is, again, it's around how the clock is stopped. So we do a deep dive into each individual that breaches those times. All those individuals have either been offered an appointment or have seen a mental health professional within the target waiting time. But because of the specifics about how that's recorded and reported, they still show as breaches. And I think I'll leave it there, Kevin. I know we're short on time.
Thanks, Eve. Sorry, slight technical inability to turn my mic back on there. That's really helpful, really comprehensive, really value the additional explanation and gloss that you provided over that. It's really good. Thank you very much. I'll open it to questions or comments from colleagues. I don't see any. Yep, no, Sarah, go on.
Thank you, Mark, Andy, for a really comprehensive report. It was just a comment for me around there's two things, I suppose. There's one of them is about data quality, and I note on some of the performance metrics we haven't got a full green pie, and something that we have talked about at board before is making sure that we can focus on what it actually says rather than is the data right. So I guess it was just wanting assurance that we've got actions in progress to make sure that we are going to make sure that we are green on all 4 elements of the data quality on that. But I just want to reiterate your point around something that, again, we've talked about at board, is making sure that we're measuring the right things. And having a really robust, thorough, whole person assessment is more important than having the care plan within the 4 weeks. And I'm happy to, use our voice nationally to make sure that we're having those conversations around. Happy to be held to account. It's got to be held to account for the right things. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, thanks again, Eve, for that, and thank you, Mark, for equally helpful talk through what the performance report is telling us. So grateful for that. And as ever, the IPR continues to be a bit of a work in progress, but it's I think a healthy and useful document. So thank you very much. Let's move on then to highlight an exception report from Audit and Risk and the annual report of the committee. Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I hope the reports were both clear, so I'll take them as read, which will enable me to go as quick as possible. In terms of the highlights and exceptions report, we met most recently in May, so it's pretty current. The 2 points I wanted to raise, one of them is effectively already been raised, which was the work we looked at around the risk and the BAF. So we picked that up earlier this morning, so I'll move on from that. The other area I just wanted to mention was we spent quite a lot of time looking at the key aspects of our annual reporting arrangements, and I think it's fair to say, you know, that sort of area of work, which is still sort of ongoing, obviously, but it showed sort of positive signs. We heard a positive assessment in terms of our ability to continue as a going concern. We were positive about our compliance with the Code of Practice for Foundation Trusts. And in terms of sort of anticipating what's going to happen over the next month or so, the head of internal audit's opinion, I'm fairly confident will land as being positive. And I think it's fair to say that our preparedness for the work of external audit again is in a very good position. So the only the big thing to arrive next, of course, is the reviewing of the final accounts, which we'll pick up in due course. So overall, I think some good stuff to come out of the May meeting. If I just move on very quickly to the annual report as well, perhaps makes sense to tie them both up. Again, I assume it's clear in terms of the report. It covers, you know, what the brief of the committee is and the areas we scrutinised during the year. And although it's a self-assessment, I think it's fair to say that we think we did a decent job of fulfilling the terms of reference and hopefully contributed to supporting the governance arrangements across the trust. So that's all I wanted to say, and happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. I'll wait a moment to see if there are any questions or comments from colleagues. Really pleased, Ian, that the committee is taking the more kind of proactive role around risk, which I think is really important, and you know, kind of rounds out the committee's role in providing assurance, systems assurance to the board. So really pleased about that. I don't see any questions or comments from colleagues, so can I ask if people can indicate whether or not they're happy to approve the annual report? That's great. Thank you very much, Ian. We'll move on then, if I can find my agenda, which at the moment I can't. Here we go. Move on then to the next item. Well, there are 3 items for you, Karen, items 7.2, 7.3 and 7.4. So should we take each of those in turn?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Karen Scott, Trust Secretary. So the first of those 3 is the annual review of governance arrangements within the Trust. And this is, as it says, annual report, and summarises everything that's been going on in relation to governance and those structures and processes we have in place throughout 2024-25. I'm going to take the paper as read. There's quite a considerable amount of detail in it, but for reassurance, this has been previously reviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee at its last meeting in May, and is recommended to the board today. I just want to draw to the board's attention in the recommendation, there is a statement there made by the Audit and Risk Committee for the board's consideration regarding governance arrangements that are in place. And I just want to reflect on the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting when it was considered, and the fact that in that statement it refers to receipt of internal audit reports and some discussions regarding recommendation tracking, limited assurance reports, and whether or not the committee felt entirely confident at that point regarding what was in the statement. But I can confirm that the Trust has only received 1 limited assurance internal audit report. I think there's only a couple that we're still outstanding final reports on, and there has been some robust work going on in the background regarding the recommendation tracking process between internal audit and the Trust and the Audit and Risk Committee chair. So I'm happy to make that recommendation to the board for its approval today. Thank you, Kevin.
So what the board has to come to a conclusion on is that whether or not we are content with the current governance arrangements in the trust as described in that paper.
Absolutely, correct? Kevin, and as
yeah.
summarised in that statement in the recommendation.
Excellent. So in the absence of any comments or questions, I'd be grateful if colleagues could indicate whether or not they're happy to do as recommended by Karen. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Shall we move on then, Karen, to item 7.3, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. This is the review of the Directors and Governors Codes of Conduct and Responsibility documents. There's a requirement for these to be reviewed at least every 2 years. That role is undertaken by the Council of Governors Standards Committee, and that review actually took place in May, earlier in May this year. The documents are appended to the report. I'm not going to go into them in any detail. Proposed amendments are identified with track changes, but just to highlight that they are particularly more administrative stroke points of factual accuracy. There's nothing significantly contextual that's changed within either of them. Both documents are for the Board of Directors approval today, and they will then go on to the Council of Governors for information and for a decision to support the documents. And then all directors and all governors, subject to approval, will be asked to re-sign these documents as amended. Other than that, Kevin, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Karen. Don't see any questions or comments. So the question is, are the board content to approve those documents for onward transmission to the Council of Governors as Karen's described? The answer is yes. Thank you very much. So we'll move on then to item 7.4, the proportionate governance arrangements. Karen, still with you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So this paper has been alluded to on a couple of occasions earlier in this meeting, and it is, I hope, fairly clearly set out within the report what the proposals are, in line with the programme of work on living within our means within the Trust that again has been referenced on numerous occasions today. The table sets out what proposed amendments are being made to board committees and other parts of the governance structure. Not particularly extreme, I would comment, but I hope will actually support providing that extra or additional capacity for our senior leaders, and then that will actually then cascade down within the organisation to provide people with the ability to focus on the real requirements at hand at the moment, not obviously losing focus on some of those really important areas of assurance that are being considered and sought by at board committee level. So happy to take any questions, but it's here for the board's approval, and then any amendments will be made subject to approval in terms of the calendar for the board. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Karen. Just a quick observation, and that is that on the target operating model programme board frequency, I'm not suggesting that we don't change it, but I would just like to be assured that we've got the agility to increase frequency if we need to, if the pace of work or the need for programme board engagement changes. We don't have to come back to board to sign that off, do we? You're on mute. Sorry, Karen.
Sorry, apologies. No, absolutely not, Kevin. This paper has been previously considered by the executive team. So as with Chris Higgins' leadership of that particular piece of work, it's considered to be appropriate at this point.
Yeah, sorry,
absolutely.
I wasn't quarrelling with whether or not
No,
it's
no, I
appropriate
know you were.
at this point.
No, but no, we don't need to bring it back to board. I think the fact that you've raised it, Kevin, we can make sure that the minutes reflect that and ensure that we don't have to return to make any further decisions. So
excellent, thank you. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? If not, grateful if you could indicate that you're happy with those arrangements. Sorry, Ian, didn't see your question.
Sorry, Kevin, I was slow on the.
Yeah, don't worry. You need to sharpen up your reflexes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a quick one, and it's that change to the frequency, resources, and people committee. I just want to check this. So I'm assuming the silence is giving me the message. But are the chairs of those committees okay with it going to 6 months? It does seem a big gap to me, notwithstanding what's already been said about one of the other committees about changing the approach if there's work that needs to be done urgently.
Sorry, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the other committee chairs, but I noticed Tim's come in. The only thing I would add at this point is that, as I've said in the report, it is proposed that we have a review of these arrangements in 6 months' time, but we can always do that at any stage if required.
Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. I'll let Di come in next and then Tim.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Karen. My point is slightly different, Kevin, so apologies if I'm interrupting flow here with Tim coming in on people.
You carry on.
But it was really just, Karen, I'm just mindful of some of the committees that meet that go on beneath this level of governance. So I'm thinking particularly reference has already been made in various points of the meeting today around the Performance Delivery and Oversight Group, or PDOG as it's known. And I suppose it's just to make sure that given that some of the committees are meeting for less time, which I absolutely endorse and want to support, that the onus then doesn't get put on those committees beneath to kind of do more work or spend more time in order to service the other committees, if that makes sense. So I suppose it's just a plea that that this proportionate governance is felt throughout the organisation. I'm sure it will be, but I think I just wanted to make that point overtly because I think it is important. Thank you.
Thanks, Di. I think it's a really valid point and challenge, and it is intended that, subject to the board's approval today at board and committee level, that this will cascade throughout the governance structure. So it is not intended that this will increase any onerous additional working lower down within the structure at all.
Thanks for that clarification, Karen. Tim.
Yeah, actually, I was going to make a similar comment or question about the those forum that feed into the individual committees and what we're going to do there. I think going back to Ian's point, I think the double's going to be in the detail. I'm very happy that we really strive to do this for the People Committee, that we make it every 6 months. But there are some implications I think that will need working through in terms of what needs to come through to the board of directors, but there's already reference to that in terms of having an extraordinary meeting. So I think we got to go for it, but let's change the plan if required.
Thanks, Tim. And I'd got slightly ahead of myself and canvassed agreement for the changes before I spotted those comments, but having taken it slightly out of order, I think the changes have been approved. So thank you, Karen, and thank you for talking us through that. Final item is the routine forthcoming board programme. I don't imagine, Karen, that you've got anything you want to add to the paper as read.
No, Kevin, other than to say, obviously, following the board's approval of those revised timetable, we may need to make some changes moving forward to this report.
course. Understood.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the agenda for the public element of today's board meeting. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your contributions and attention. Had some really important conversations there, particularly around the response to the Callacane case, but more generally. So thank you for all of that. For those of us that reconvene with the board to deal with private matters, it's now 10 to 12, more or less. Can I suggest that we reconvene at 20 past 12 in private? So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Mm.